All
Life is
right.
life, and life is just life. And so we're going to
Yeah.
talk about today. What's been going on? But let's talk about New Year's first. I don't want to just dive
I know.
right
I'm
in.
just
Like,
thinking,
I
yeah,
feel like
it's
I haven't really
2025
talked to you
already.
since the new year started. So, and we
True.
launched, right? Too. So
I know.
let's,
I know. And I was kind of like wanting to kind of see what the vibe was after the first episode
hmm
and what the take was. And I do feel like it's been positive, but we're still kind of getting our land legs, back from,
from the
how
sea.
we want. Yeah.
Our,
Right. Our
our
sea legs.
land legs from the sea.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so I feel good about it. And I think it's, if people were expecting us to be like corporate, this is a corporate podcast. We've been a part of those at different companies that did that kind of thing. And mm, I'm not interested and I think that's more for like companies who want to have something to show clients too, right? Like that's not really our vibe, I think. Now I've
Yeah,
said
we're the
vibe twice.
Worksties. Like, we
Yeah,
get
we're
along.
going to be talking about ourselves, our life, our history, what our thoughts are, our feelings, our opinions, and all of that.
I have a lot of opinions, by the way. So,
Girl, you don't even know. I have
yeah,
many.
a lot of things to say on that. But yeah, so really, you know what I was thinking about, 2025, when the calendar hits, right? There's all this new, what do I want to call it? There's this energy that comes into
Hmm.
play when the year switches, right? Just from it going
Yeah.
2024, December 31st, January 1, 2025. And I'm like, well, nothing really fundamentally changes other
No,
than the
no,
number
but
of
I
the
think it is
year,
an energy. Yeah, and like
right?
yeah, I think it is just a energy shift of like,
Mhm.
it's sort of like a clean slate, you know? I've never been into New Year's resolutions because I
Yeah.
feel like if you make changes, you should just make changes. But I understand like the idea because one thing I was just thinking about earlier was like um words of the year. Have you ever done
Mhm.
that? And I've never really done it. I've kind of had words that sort of stuck with me when something significant happened. Like I remember in 2020 with COVID, I was really thinking about resilience a lot and then just like being resilient to all these things. But now I feel like I need others,
Yeah.
and I don't mean that in the sense of like, um, it's so literal, but maybe just, like a couple of words that sort of define how you want the year to be. So I think that's part of it is sort of, projecting what you hope to happen or what you're going to try to strive for is better than like
Yeah.
resolution.
I have, as you were talking, like, what would my word
Okay.
be for 2025? And I was bouncing all these different things. But I'm like, no, not that. No, not that. No, not that. But what I came up with is that I think covers all of the bases. So whether I'm, with you working on the Worksties or whatever we're doing, right? Or whatever I'm doing or whatever you're doing, it's just connected. Like, just being connected,
Yeah.
staying connected, being grounded,
Yeah.
really being present in the moment
Right.
and really being present with everything that I'm doing. So the connected or connection, whatever you want to say, connection, whether it's I'm walking in the woods and I'm out on a nature walk in connecting to what's around me, to the people around me, to being connected to, the product that I make or whatever it is. I just want to be
Right.
uber, super duper
Okay.
connected.
Super connect.
Connected spiritually, connected physically. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I
because it
just
has
want to be
different
connected in
meaning.
2025. I felt a little disconnected.
Yeah, me too. And I think connection's a good one just because you can be connected in so many different ways, like you just alluded to. I think sometimes we get, or at least I do when I'm connected, it's like I'm tied to my phone and
Mhm.
doom scrolling and things like that. And I don't want to do that. And I think, I kind of took this multi-year hiatus from social media besides LinkedIn. And I've kind of started to come back to it. And that's been interesting because a lot of the reasons why I disconnected with it are still there.
Yeah.
I got sick of the negativity and I really felt like I lost respect for some people that were
Mm.
in my life just because of how they behaved or the information they were putting out. And I didn't like that. I was like, I don't really want to know this about this person. This isn't how I knew them. Um, so, from that perspective, but so I'm trying to just go into it and be thoughtful about how I use social media now.
So is it
And that's
thoughtfully
where,
connected?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think
Just
that when I'm going through difficult times, which is like, it seems like it's always difficult times in a lot of
right.
ways. But when I'm going through difficult times, I have a tendency just to pull back and kind of really embrace the introverted side of myself and become a little bit um like a hermit in some ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
Same.
I feel like I don't have the energy to put out into the world to be positive for other people. And I mean, when I was like in my 20s, and I think most people do this, when I was a teenager and in my 20s, I talked to my friends about everything. Like, if something's going on, I gotta talk to them. I gotta, like, you know, flesh this out. What do you think about this? Whatever. We gotta talk through everything. And I used to do this with my mom a lot too. And then as I've gotten older, I'm like, I don't want people to do that to me all the time, and I don't want to do that to other people. So if I feel like I have a lot on my mind that I'm working through, then I kind of pull back too because I don't want to burden other people with that.
Yeah,
If
that can
that
be
makes
detriment though too. Like your mental health suffers if you pull too far back. If you,
yeah, yeah,
so connected in the right ways. I feel like, and I'm a Pisces, so it's very emotional in here. Like it's very emotional in here. There's luckily, I have Virgo moon and Gemini rising, so I get the social and I get the, very meticulous with details and things like that. I'm not a,
right.
just completely dreamy person walking around this world, but like I think there's something to be said for having won the right connections, to the people who are your trusted tribe, and
Mhm.
I know that if I didn't have you throughout this last year, I might have gone a little crazy. I mean, almost 2 years, right? Like I might have gone a little crazy. Well, maybe some
Yeah,
people think I did, but you know,
yeah.
but like you
No, I
need
agree.
that,
I agree.
when you pull too far back, you still have to kind of go forward and, you know, there's people that want to help and pull you out of those things or those times or just be there to listen and it's not a burden.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, but it's interesting because I kind of had that epiphany a while ago.
Hmm.
Like, oh, I'm kind of handling things differently than I would have years ago.
Yeah.
And, um, it's just, it's kind of almost shocking how little I talk to people about things. Like you're probably one of the people besides Kevin that I talk to the most about what's going on in my world, and, no, I
I'm a
know that.
bolt.
Huh,
It's like, because
I
I'm a
know.
bolt.
Yeah.
You can't shake me.
Still, yeah. So, yeah, it's just interesting. So I think maybe, another good word for me this year would be maybe, oh, I just had it, connectedness, but also, I
Discernment?
can't openness maybe, or not not being so hindered, or I don't know. It'll come to me. But I just thought that was interesting because I think, yeah, if you can look at sort of what is bothering you
Mhm.
and what you kind of have to work on as a person, then that's a good way to approach it.
Yeah. Yeah. Agree. All right. So mine's connection in different ways, right? Not necessarily just scrolling mine because I don't need any more of that in my life, but just meaningful connections to everything around me is what I'll say. And then to people as well. Yeah, and I really don't have any New Year's resolutions. I just need to get myself together. I need to go to the gym. I need to, do all those things, which I do
Right.
go
Well, that's
pretty
like,
regularly. My
yeah, that's
walks I
like
need to get back
typical
to, but
stuff.
it's not a resolution. It's just like, girl, you need to get back to that.
Right. Well, I think it's all connected too, because like if you can get your brain in the right space
Yeah.
and your feelings about things, then everything else will kind of come along, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right, so let's talk about, there's been a lot of buzz, I feel like, over the last year or so. And I've seen a lot of posts on LinkedIn and different places talking about it, right? And then I've also seen job descriptions that are shifting and changing, but talent acquisition, one, there's is not a specialty, some are saying, right? And then the disagreement between that, let's plug it into HR and see if it works. And then the other piece of that is also the differentiation between talent acquisition, recruiting, and staffing, which I have an opinion. I know you have an opinion on that of each one. We've been in all of these different worlds over the last 20 years, right? Corporate recruiting, done it, have the souvenirs, right? And then
Mhm.
staffing, recruitment, all day, professional and industrial and, other places. RPO, recruitment process outsourcing, is really talent acquisition strategy coming in and you're taking someone's function over. MSP,
Mhm.
managed service provider, when you come in
Mhm.
and you're filling all that contingent labor and you're the supplier and putting in those systems, right? What am I missing? BPO, business process outsourcing. We've been a
Mhm.
part of that, pulling out business and, hey, I'll send this box for you for 10 cents a unit and you're moving based on that, and taking that business process out and plugging that in and finding the talent for the company for that. And then I would say PPO would be the preferred payroll outsourcing. So when you bring
Mhm.
that function in, which can do more functions than just payroll, which is really interesting. So I built a
Right.
solution way back when, where it made more sense to have them run a talent pool than it did any other business in the organization, just because of the cost and because of the overhead that would have happened with that solution. So yeah, I think we've sliced it every way. Did I miss any?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I think talent acquisition is sort of the umbrella term, but everything else kind of falls underneath it because they're so similar but everything has variances depending on what the business needs are, right? Because corporate hiring, if you're just doing like if you're working in a corporate recruiting team, your role is similar to everything else. It just has its nuances and its, specific
Don't ask me to
specific.
say it because I'm going to be right there with you.
I know,
There
I'm
are
like,
certain
I didn't know
words
the word.
for
Know the
me.
word. It has its specifics for that particular company, So I think that's talent acquisition is it has nuances depending on what you're recruiting for and who you're recruiting for.
Yeah.
Or
I
yeah,
look
it's like
I think about when I think about talent acquisition, right? I think about it in three buckets when you're recruiting: plan for demand, react to vacancy, and then my third one is your skill sets, right? So when you're up leveling skill sets, you're planning, and then you're what am I trying to say? What's the third word for that? Geez, my
like
brain just went.
projection or
Plan for demand, react to vacancy, and lead with talent. Why
oh
couldn't
yeah,
that
yeah.
just not come to me? I've said this for I don't know how many years, probably 10, 15, and my brain just went. But yeah, so when you're planning, you're leading with talent, right? That's like
Mhm.
your high cost, high dollar recruitment is what I look, and your high dollar strategy. So that's saying, I have this person. So this kind of gets back to that skill based recruiting a little bit. But if you have a higher level position, or you're saying I have this person in advance that I'd like to place within this organization, there's not a vacancy yet, right? So to me, that's leading with talent. The talent comes first and says, this is a really good individual. Can you place this person in that organization? And then you're planning for demand is, your seasonal shifts, whatever that looks like, and those type of things. And then your react to vacancy, I feel like, is where staffing comes in, even though you need a strategy surrounding each one of these things, a talent acquisition strategy, right? That's where you're just kind of pushing in the talent. It's contingent labor, it's high volume, it's fast paced, it is all of those things. But each one of those, regardless of what you're doing and regardless of what you're filling and regardless of what seat you're sitting in, needs a strategy. You have to build a talent acquisition strategy. And what I've seen is some people say, well, talent acquisition, corporate, that's strategy. You wouldn't know how to do that in staffing. You wouldn't know how to
Right.
do that in some of these other businesses. And fact of the matter is, to be able to get that many people in a quick amount of time like staffing does, man, that's a strategy, right? And that's something
Right.
you have to think about and deliver in all of that. And then when you think about corporate talent acquisition, filling every single level within there, sometimes they get a provider and the provider will do some, and then the corporate TA team will do some other roles that they're recruiting for, sometimes even outsource at all. But you have a
Mhm.
strategy for each role, right? Your recruitment is just a little bit slower at times, sometimes obscenely slow based on some of these processes I've been through. And people aren't really looking at things and things like that. And, qualifications and who's really fit. They have 500 people and they're just taking, the first people that they see and dispositioning everybody out in the system saying, thanks, but no thanks. And then you have, your recruiting, which is you're doing the function of recruiting, right? It's immediate fulfillment. It's a little bit faster to me than corporate talent acquisition when you think about it in that way. So there might be some TAs that operate in this manner because they have high volume roles, high volume positions. They might be filling corporate or call centers and things like that. But kind of that's how I look at them. I don't know. What do you think, and how do you look at it? How do you see it?
I agree with that. I think I'm kind of it seems like there's been such a shift over the last several years where things that would be high volume are, one part of the equation, and high volume is always going to be higher. It's always going to be fast. Um, but then it seems like a lot of companies are having a harder time sort of making those projections for whatever reason. And so then they kind of fall behind because if they need to engage an agency or some, a staffing company or something like that, that they're almost behind the eight ball, right? I mean, staffing companies can level up fairly quickly, but they do need some forecasting, to be able to have the people on staff to be able to fill the roles once they become available and that sort of thing. So I feel like there's a little bit of disconnection there with companies willing to sort of make that forecasting. And then I think with other companies that are doing more strategic hires, they've almost become way too strategic, where it's like, you know, it seems like everybody's looking for the unicorn. And it's like, unicorns are a mythical
In my
creature.
head is
They
going,
don't
fill the
exist.
job, Junior. Just
Yeah. And
fill
it's
it.
like, I understand because you have to the way my brain works,
Yeah.
which is probably terrifying to some people, but the way my brain works is like, I tend to see things like in a 360 model.
Hmm.
So when, you and I had that conversation about this company who was filling a role that, oh, they found their unicorn. I mean, I start imagining what it's like in that office or, whatever, wherever it is,
Yeah.
that they're talking sort of behind the scenes of like, yay, we found our unicorn. And it's like,
Does that
why
come
would
with a
you want
horn?
to
I mean,
hire a
complete with horn and
unicorn? I
all.
don't get. Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, what does that? First of all, what does that even mean,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And second of all, does the person who you hired know that you consider them a unicorn? Because if I was getting a job at a company and they were like, "You're a unicorn, we want to hire you," I'd be like, "Whoa, you're
A lot
setting
of
up
pressure.
some really weird like projections that I don't know if I can meet, right?" And what does that mean to you? Does it mean like I'm, this mythical creature that I'm gonna like I don't even remember like what a unicorn's supposed to be other than just like a beautiful creature. And so if you're gonna set that up and then you're gonna tell people who are gonna work with this person, because I'm guessing they're not gonna be alone, um, hey, we just found the perfect person. They're totally a unicorn. I mean, I would feel really weird about that if somebody came into my organization, I'm going to work with this person, and they're being called a unicorn.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what does it mean? Make me a troll? Or like, do I live under a bridge now? Like, what is
Well, you could just
happening?
see, like, some of the people, like, and how they would react. They'd be like, well, go ask your unicorn.
Right. Right. I'm going to go
It could go
slay.
wrong so many ways, and that's a lot of
Yeah.
pressure. Like, I always consider myself a unicorn. I even use it for,
Right.
as re-advertising, but,
But like, I would
to
feel weird
say
about
that,
somebody
you
else.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Because you're going to have to work with these people. And if they're like, oh, some unicorn you are, because there's always going to be people who are like,
that's
I
your
wanted that
standard. That's
job,
got
but
to
this
be
isn't
held.
it. And they're going to be pulling you apart,
Yeah.
right? So you're setting up this like really negative, sort of toxic environment inadvertently because you're so excited about this person that if you're looking at them as unicorn, all they can ever do is let you down, right? I mean, maybe they'll come in and they'll have the new shine of a new person, blah, blah, but they're still like human.
Yeah.
They're still going to get sick or make mistakes or not get along with another colleague or whatever is going to, there's going to be real.
I'm seeing
And
very
so,
frazzled unicorn hair. Like, with all the pressure that
right?
goes along.
And
Like, I've
their
never seen a
unicorn,
frazzled
their horn
unicorn.
is like tarnished or like off center or whatever. It's like, you know, so
Hairs
I just
everywhere instead of, like
right, and
rainbow
yeah, yeah,
colors, not even, don't even know what they are anymore.
right. They're no longer like the My Little Pony or
Oh,
colors and
I had
stuff. Yeah.
some My Little Ponies that got trashed. That's exactly what's in my head right now.
Oh yeah, when I got older and my Barbies, like they all got like mohawks and yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, so I just feel like getting back to my point is just that I think we've become so strategic that people are very anxious and nervous about making a hire instead of getting the role placed. They're
yeah,
dragging out the hiring process. They're making candidates go through these extreme situations and so by the time they're getting the job, they're probably so burnt out they won't even be able to do the job, right? Or they're not excited about it anymore because they're like, what is my actual job going to be like if this was the hiring process, right?
yeah.
And and I think it's just and it delays the process. It costs the company more money because they're going through this process. They have this role open for longer. I think that we've got to get faster and not necessarily lose a strategy, but like really figure out what it is you're looking for before you start interviewing people.
Yeah,
Because I
but what
think
I would
that's
say is if
about
you have
them.
a good strategy, Danielle, like to your point, if you you have to have a strategy in hiring. I
Right.
mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But if you've set up that strategy and you're executing to that strategy and you're making adjustments as you go, because I will say, if you're setting a strategy on January 1st, 2025, let's say it's implemented, and this is your
Hmm.
strategy, and you're not adjusting through the back end of the year to how talent shifts, how the workforce shifts, how your business shifts. There's so many shifts that happen. Hopefully, it records shifts when I say that, 'cause that's what I'm saying.
Right.
When you think about it, right, you have to adjust that. So it has to be nimble, it has to be agile, and it has to be able to execute with speed. All right. So back to your point.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, and of course, it's probably unlikely that if this was a new role, for instance, that you're going to have the strategy defined out of the gate. But as soon as you start seeing some applications, the recruiter, whoever is going through those, needs to reconnect with the hiring manager and say, hey, so we're starting to get some applications. This is what we're seeing. Is there anything about this that is, not correlating to what you want, 'cause especially if they're just getting different types of candidates from what they were expecting. Now,
Yeah.
there's always gonna be some of that, people who are, applying for jobs that maybe are outside of their niche or whatever. But, I think there has to be that constant evaluation happening that you're on the right track. And I remember when I was recruiting and I was filling, very specific roles, I would be meeting with the hiring manager at least once a week. Especially if I'd submitted them a couple of candidates, I would say, okay, I've sent you three. I need feedback before I'm going to continue on. So your rec is going to be put on hold, or I'll continue to get applications, but I'm not going to submit anybody and really go through that formal process. Um, but I think the hiring managers have to feel that the recruiters are empowered to make that discretion. So, that you don't end up with, a situation here recently we had where my husband was applying for a part-time job and he goes in and it looks like, it's a really short term, seasonal job for about 12, what he found out was like 12 hours a week. And he's interviewing in a group interview with 10 other people. And the person who's doing the hiring is like, well, I'm doing interviews for the next week. So we were kind of figuring like, is he actually going to be interviewing like 100 people for a
Right.
seasonal role? Like at 12, like that's crazy. And when he told me that, I was like, she's bad at her job. And and I don't mean that in the sense of like she needs to go, but like there's something wrong there. If
Danielle,
this
you
company
fired someone last episode. Now someone else needs to go this one.
right, I know. I'm like,
Danielle,
fire 'em
with them.
all, right? No, but it's like, obviously her company is not guiding her in the
Right.
way
Yeah.
that they need to,
True.
because I've been in that role and I know that you don't need to interview 100 people. Sure, maybe they all have similar qualifications and they're all likely candidates, but then you should be just talking to them on the phone.
Yeah.
Say, are you cool with these hours? This is what it is.
You're
kind
wasting a
of,
lot of
or
people's time is what it comes down to.
yes.
Like, you're wasting a lot of people's time. I did an interview, it was a local one here, and it was for like an HR plus recruiting plus all of those things. So I was just super curious and interested. This is a local business. They want to expand, they want to grow, and do all those different things. And I asked him, how many candidates were they seeing? So this is the CEO of a small business. I'm going to call it a small business because it was maybe on its way to medium. They had 80 employees that they had built up or so over the years. So not super small, like you have 1, 2 people, but
Hmm.
several people. And then they would train the technicians. It was for AC cooling. They did plumbing and different things like that. So they would train some of these AC technicians and things like that. When I asked him how many people they were seeing and how many people they were screening, he was doing 30 interviews a week as a CEO.
How are you going to do anything else?
When are you running your business?
Right.
When?
You don't have the right people on the job, or they don't know what they're being tasked with, or they don't feel empowered to help filter these people out to say, this might be, this person's schedule doesn't really mesh, or, whatever. You should be really empowering your people to be
Yeah.
much more judgmental about who's coming through and who you're willing to have take up your CEO's time, because
Mhm.
they don't obviously respect him either. Because if they did, they'd be like, I'm not putting anybody in front of this guy who I don't feel like is a good, solid match.
Well,
At
they
least like
did, but I
90.
think he also liked that control over his business and wasn't ready to let go. You know how some people just aren't
And
ready to let go quite
like,
yet?
let me see everybody. I want to
But
talk to everybody.
still, like, that's just so many people. Like, if you did a really good job up front and you saw half those people, you shouldn't need, and they were really big on culture and the environment they were creating and everything else. So I get that too. But yeah, you don't need to bring people in. You can do a quick phone screen, right? They did do a video up front, which I thought was really interesting. But even based on the video, they were bringing in that many people.
I mean, that's 6
Blew
a
my mind.
day. If you're, or, you're doing 8 a day or something, if you're doing them 4 days a week, or, like, that's a lot of people to be spending. And if, even if you only give 20 minutes of that every day or for every interview, that's a lot of time, and that's
It was a lot.
exhausting.
Yeah, like I said, how do you expand and actually grow your business doing all that? So it goes back to, I mean, regardless of what you're filling, right? These were HVAC technicians, you know, plumbers and things like that. If you're filling
Training.
high level corporate, you need a strategy. You need a strategy
Right.
no matter what you're filling, however that looks.
Right, exactly, and I think that's what's gotten lost is, like, here you have, on one hand, like, technicians who are probably have some experience, or they're gonna get more training. They have to be able to move around in tight spots and think on their feet, and, there's a lot of, like, physical attributes, I would imagine, that are correlated to that job.
Hmm.
There's that, and then you have, over here, this, retail job, but it's very limited hours. And I think it was like they wanted people to come in like from 5 a.m. to like 10 or something like that, or 9, basically 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And so that's a very specific schedule, right? And I think, and so it's like, yeah, the strategy has to be unique for everything. And I think that's what they're just like, oh, we're just going to see everybody. We're going to talk to everybody, because they feel like that's what they have to do to maybe feel like they're giving everybody a chance. I don't know where that's coming from. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like, the recruiters need to be empowered to do their job. They need to know what their job is. And if it's like a, small company, maybe their people don't really know how to do that. If it's a retail location of a big conglomerate, their leadership isn't making that clear.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
I was interviewing for one. I'm telling you, these days I'm a professional interviewee. Is what I say. I think I was a professional interviewer, and I'm an E. I'm looking for a really good home, that good corporate culture and all those things where I can really make a difference, make an impact. So it very end stages. I mean, this must have been, Danielle, like a 2-month process or so. If I go and look back at these, and this is a very large company. This is the large company. So at the very, like, close to the end, we're doing fine. I have to do a presentation. I never had to put together and had people ask to put together presentations. I'm
That
not a
seems to
big
be
fan of that
company
because you're
standard.
taking my intellectual content. You are taking
Right.
my intelligence, and I can't believe that you're not
And if I
using that
get
somewhere
hired
along the way.
doing that,
Uh,
you know,
yeah, so I've done, I think, 3 different presentations, by the way. Oh, bridesmaid, quite a
oh
bit.
god. And then what do they
So
do with it if they hire you? Are they just gonna hire
exactly.
somebody else and tell them to implement this?
Yeah, if I see any of those words on any of those companies' websites said it's proprietary, potential. I'm coming.
Right. Yeah,
I'm
I know you
coming
should
if
put
you're
that in,
watching this.
like, station proprietary.
But it's towards the end anyways, right? So progressing through, top candidate, top, whatever. This is something I'm not used to. I really feel like, let me digress for one more second. But I truly feel like this point in time, after leaving my last job, right? So after leaving Clover, I was meant to be a candidate. So I could go through this and really understand where these talent acquisition processes are
I
broken,
think it's
where
great
these
for anybody
companies are
out
broken.
today.
Because if
Yeah.
I was sitting in my seat, right, and there's been a lot of people who have remained in their seat, no knock to them at all, but really understanding this candidate seat is
In
so
this day
eye-opening. It's
right.
it's so eye-opening. So anyways, going through this, right, and through the whole process, this is months invested. My time's invested in this presentation that I've spent a few hours on. Oh, probably spent more than that on it. Got a
You is so much
migraine.
when you're looking for a job, right? I mean, that's what is yeah.
Right. You don't believe I've done this for 20 plus years. All right, I'll do a presentation for you.
Right.
Go ahead and use it
Sure.
later. But anyways, so at the very end, and so the recruiter calls me and says, there's going to be a little bit more delay. A late candidate that's a referral just entered the process. And I'm like, what? Like, like, make a decision already. You're months into this. If you want to hire me as some person, I probably don't want to work there at this point right now. And, anyways, I didn't want to work there. Anyways, everything works out. Everything happens for a reason, but you can't continue to delay these candidates. If you make a bad hiring decision, you take accountability and you fire, right? That's a good
Yeah.
strategy in my
You
mind.
move
That's a
on.
really good strategy because if you're going to hire someone, I've seen a lot of companies hire someone, even at the highest levels, they don't work out. They're gone pretty fast, when you think about
Right.
it. There exists some, maybe a little bit longer, but just hire fast, fire fast. I'm not saying do it carelessly or recklessly or anything like that, but it should not take 2 months, 3 months in a hiring unless you're maybe interviewing for a CEO, even then, or COO,
Even then,
it shouldn't
feel
take that long. Even
yeah.
then, it shouldn't take that.
I mean, because I feel like at that level, those should take a little bit longer, but I don't think they do because I think the candidate pool is so small that usually they kind of have an idea of who they're looking for or, whatever. So I think that actually is probably faster, which is frightening when you think about it, that a CEO could be placed faster than somebody who's like mid-career, mid-management, whatever, or even, and, not quite entry level, but sort of like, early career. Yeah. I think it really is just people not knowing what they're looking for,
Mhm.
not understanding what the process should look like, and being afraid to hire the wrong person.
Yeah.
And most states are like, you know, at will employment that if unless you're hiring within a union or something, most people don't have contracts or anything. So, I mean, like we were talking about that company that was like, well, we think you might get bored in 6 months. Like, you, how do you know where I'm going to
Tell
be
me
in,
I'm going to get
like,
bored.
the audacity company would say that to me,
Yeah.
is like, well, how do I know that your company is even going to exist in 6 months?
Right.
I haven't seen, I haven't cracked the books, to make sure that you're actually profitable. I don't know what the situation is. How do I know that the person who's going to hire me that I feel like I could work for is still going to be here
Okay.
and that the replacement, there's a lot that can happen. So I think that we think that you might be bored. Like, you think you're doing me a favor? Like, what? I don't understand. How are you have the audacity to decide what is right for me,
Yeah, yeah,
you
that's
know?
so
But
true. Yeah.
there's so many things about what is happening that I mean, obviously my feathers get very ruffled and I get upset about,
Feathers are up.
and the
Feathers
older
are
I get, the more vocal I become
yeah.
about it. So it's like, you know, I probably say more in a work environment than I should. But
Well,
yeah, but you're right. Because like some of the people we've worked with, and great that they've been able to stay in their jobs for like 20 plus years. But, I remember a couple of years ago, I had a friend who had been at a company for many years, like basically from like his early 20s to like late 30s. And so he'd been in this company for a really long time. And this was probably 2013, 2012, something like that. And so when you're in this industry, when you're doing this type of work, people in your lives are always come forward and are like, "Hey, can you help me out with a resume or, give me some advice or whatever."
resume
And,
writing is not my thing, by the way. I am the worst
oh, I
at
know.
and
Yeah.
everyone thinks in recruiting you're this professional resume writer. No, no,
And
I'm
no,
not. Like
yeah.
I don't
No,
like resumes. I
recruiters are
don't
the
even like
worst
writing
at it.
my own.
Yeah, recruiters are the worst at it. But like I'll give you tips. I'll give you some insight in what it is I think you probably should do to find a job. But I remember when specifically was looking, the last time he looked for work, he got a job out of the newspaper. Like he literally was like getting the newspaper and looking for want ads and stuff. And at this time,
Remember the penny
that was when,
saver? Need to advertise in the penny saver. If you were in the penny
my God,
saver, was it really advertised?
right. Yeah. And so, I remember when, I worked at a company, we were running ads on Sunday and then, we'd get the applications on Monday and then maybe we'd run it again on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever. And at that time, when I talked to him, I think Career Builder still had their distribution network with newspapers, but it was largely online. And I was like, dude, you're wasting your time looking for jobs are there even want ads anymore? I don't even know.
I'm sure there
But
are, but I'm
yeah, but it's not going to
are
be.
there?
And so I had to redirect him on how he needed to look for a job. But thinking about it, a lot of people that we work with have worked at the same company in different jobs, different roles. So for the same company for like 20 plus years. And you think about, okay, so it's 2025. If you got a job at a company in 2005, so 20 years ago, right? What did that world look like? Um, I think maybe, yeah, but there was like MySpace, but there was no Facebook. There was
Were we
no
on MySpace together? Was I in your top 8? That's a real question I have.
I'm trying to remember. I know
I know
yeah,
we
I
got on
think,
Facebook together around the same time because we both
yeah,
signed up for
yeah, I
LinkedIn
think
around the
we're,
same time, and we're like the first,
yeah,
like some of the original users of LinkedIn when everyone was like, that thing's not going to work at network to find people for
yeah, but
jobs. They were laughing at us. Remember?
I think I
We got
started on MySpace in like 2005 or 2006
yeah, I don't know.
because I remember I had a friend who invited me to it, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I started using it, and I'm like, this is so weird. And learning how to like do your own, backgrounds and oh my
I
God.
don't think we were on
So,
my. I think we started in the early Facebook days together in LinkedIn. I know that for sure because I
yeah,
remember sitting
I
on
think we might
site
have
at the
been
client
MySpace
signing up for
fans
LinkedIn. I
too.
remember that.
I think we might have been MySpace friends too. Anyway, but my point is like, if you were starting in a job in 2005 and you've never had to actively look for a job, you maybe interviewed because maybe people reached out or you applied or whatever, but you've not been actively a candidate in 20 years, especially the last 20 years and how
I
much
have
has
not
changed.
been an active candidate in 20 years. Let me tell you, like from ever since Orbital, I was recruited from company to company. I didn't
Right.
have really a break in between that, right? So either my mentor was taking me from place to place to place, or someone called me and said, hey, how do we get you here? Up until the very last company. So I had not had a true candidate experience. I mean, I did interview through an executive recruiter for, med trackers, but it still was like an in-person. We started drawing, org charts. And like, this is my people right here. Like, I want to work
Right.
for this woman. Like, I think she'd be awesome, and I can really shape out the RPO business. It was running the whole practice. So, but I really had not interviewed in 20 plus years. I am and horrible interviewee. Sometimes I feel like I don't know what I'm
Right.
saying. Like I get lost in
Right.
it. Like
You're like,
it's
I
really
gotta
bad.
dig
I
out
don't
that
know what I'm
money
doing.
kid,
Like
right?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there with like so many other people and so many other
Yeah.
job seekers. Like I had been highly recruited. I was a highly recruited person in talent, and to kind of be in
Right.
this situation, I'm grateful for it because I am seeing everything that is wrong in
I
recruiting
think it's
talent
even
acquisition.
this
Trust
year, the couple of years has been extremely difficult. So I've never seen so many. When I log into LinkedIn, I feel like either the first post I see is either somebody saying that they got laid off and they're looking for work, or somebody's just started a new position, or the other one is they've completed some sort of certification. I mean, those probably naturally get pushed to the top of your feed by LinkedIn anyway, but it really tells you something because it's like either people are looking for work, they're doing some sort of certification to help them get work, or they just landed something.
yeah,
And it's that's a lot,
yeah. I feel like your
in our
algorithm is really messed up too. That's a whole nother topic. But
yeah,
I would like to take the time to do a PSA for all of those on LinkedIn that are looking for someone. Please, when you post that job and you put up there up top in your comments, put the location. Is it on-site or remote? Is it hybrid? And stop telling people to DM you that are not connected to you in the first degree because
yeah,
unless they have
yeah,
LinkedIn Premium, they can't get
right,
to you. They can't comment. There is nothing they can do, and you're missing out on a lot of talent. So
right.
that's where
And if
my
you're
feathers grow.
unemployed
Please
and you
share the
can't
information
afford,
appropriately.
yeah, LinkedIn will do a discounted rate for you the first couple of months you're unemployed, but after that, they're charging you full price. And when you're like, well, I got to give up Netflix and all these other premium
My
subscriptions,
Gaia channel. I had to let go of Gaia. Sad.
oh yeah. So, I just think, yeah, those are really good points. And I think, and if it's hybrid, specify what that means.
Yes,
So does that mean you're
please.
going to have to go to office once a week or as needed? Or are you really expecting somebody to be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday? And so be specific because don't assume that people know what that means because it's different everywhere you go.
Mhm.
You know, going in once a month could be considered hybrid or only for special, situations or for big meetings or whatever. Um,
Yeah, give
and
the deets. Give the deets. There's been
yeah,
like I know people who are looking, and I am that person that even if I apply for something, I'll send the job to someone else who has a similar skill set, or maybe I'm like, hey, I took a shot, but this is really up your alley, or whatever the case may be, right? But I can't even count how many times on LinkedIn I've had to say so and so, right? Not sure where the location is, not sure.
right,
All of
right.
these other things, but maybe just message and see if you're interested. But I mean, they can unless they're a, first connection to the person. So yeah, share the information.
Yeah. And I think we started talking about this in the beginning, and I just remembered that I don't think we really talked about it was that there's this overlap that I'm seeing where talent acquisition is just now part of a function of HR.
Yeah.
And like this, they want people who have experience with HR, which HR is a skilled thing of its own,
Yeah.
right? And so people go to school, they get certifications, they do these things so they understand the law and how to do all these things that fall into HR. But then they're trying to throw talent acquisition, recruiting, hiring into that same bucket. And I don't think that's right because they're really different jobs. I mean, I remember back in the day when you'd have, an HR person and you'd have like personnel, and the personnel person would be handling, your hours, they would be handling any paycheck issues, they'd be handling actual hiring and interviewing and stuff like that. So they're trying to like meld these in. And I get it because they're probably like, well, we're going to have to pay somebody $100,000 a year. We are going to need one person to do all of this. And I think companies are really shortchanging themselves because even if you need to bring in somebody just temporarily to do seasonal hiring, go talk to a staffing agency or go bring somebody in from a contract perspective. But I don't think it's right to put all that on an HR person. Like they
Yeah.
don't have enough to do already.
Or go get an
and they don't
RPO that can
they're
actually take that whole strategy, right? An RPO will
right,
actually set up that talent acquisition strategy. They'll have a plan. You're holding them accountable through SLAs and KPIs. You're paying them per hire, ideally, right?
right,
So when you think about the cost per hire or whatever, yes, it could be more money than paying one person to sit in the seat, but you're going to get a really good executed talent strategy if you hire the right RPO, which, there's
right,
some that do, they call themselves a full cycle, but they're really not. There's some that truly do the full cycle. You even get technology bolted onto that. So, when you think about that talent acquisition, so it is a specialty. It is an absolute specialty. Yes, maybe it does
right,
sometimes roll into the CHRO, right? Or that's what makes sense based on organizational
right,
structures. And you can't have too many layers. If you do want to get
right.
to somehow this flat organization to where you can make decisions quickly and understand how that works within there. But, you know, that actual talent acquisition function is a true specialty that needs a strategy around it, employee experience, how you're bringing people in, the technology, because that in turns hooks into your payroll system and everything else, how you bring people on. So, it's definitely a niche and a skill set, and it's a learned niche and skill set, I will see. And
Oh,
I will
yeah,
say, because I recently saw a job for a recruiter that someone posted and it said they needed a degree. Where are we going to get
right.
a talent acquisition
What recruiter
degree?
degree
Really?
is there?
It's School of
Nobody has a
Hard
bachelor's
Knocks.
of recruiting.
Yeah.
Nobody has a bachelor's of staffing or bachelor's of TA. And if you're looking for people with a bachelor's in HR, again, that is a completely different job. And it's different from marketing too. Like there's a lot of crossover within the companies, as you and I both know. We've worked at companies where you're working with these different aspects of the business, where you're working with procurement, you're working with finance, you're
Hmm.
working with HR, you're working with marketing. Like all these things are interconnected, but they all have very important roles. And I think that's part of the problem. And I don't know if it's because like executives and CEOs are getting paid so much more now. I mean, that's a whole other topic, but getting paid so much more now that the lower level or mid tier jobs that are doing those functions and making the company sort of operationally successful are they have they're making it more of a skeleton crew
Yeah.
to free budget that they can use for, whatever it is for their stockholders or their boards or their executives, whatever. And I think that I get that and that's companies want to do that, but I think they're really shortchanging themselves. Like just, hire a couple more people in certain roles that can help fill out and actually help your company be successful. The longer those roles are open, that then you're losing money, right? And you're overtaxing the people who are trying to do three jobs.
Yeah.
Many people, like I remember so many, organizational structure changes we've been through where we lost a person here, and then we were like we were already struggling, and now you've removed this person, so we're going to have to absorb that work. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like
When you think about it too, right? When companies go through a downturn or when the economy is going, well, who's the first person or people that are
recruit,
like, oh, it's recruiting, right? It's your staffing arm, which makes sense in some
what you
ways.
need the HR people to handle the layoffs and stuff, so
Right.
they're going to pay for now. But the recruiting and that makes total sense. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember in 2009 when the economy turned and companies let go of the recruiting teams. As soon as it started to come back, then they were struggling to figure out how to fill their jobs. So like staffing and RPO started to see an upswing because they were the natural place for companies to go to for help.
Yeah. You got to be able to, like, when you do go through a downturn as an organization, a company, like, still have a good strategy and a talent acquisition strategy that you can stand up. Let's say it turns in 6 months. Let's say it turns, or you need to still continue to hire. Where are you going to get that best talent from? And what does your process look like from a candidate experience standpoint? Because you also don't want to ruin that, even if hiring is slow, right? When you think about that,
Right.
candidate experience is
Yeah.
so important in bringing in. And
I
the
agree.
other piece to that,
I
Danielle,
agree.
that I was thinking about is um, when you think about that process, right? And you think about the talent acquisition process and you wipe it away. Your company doesn't need to staff right now. You're good. You're full. You're laying people off like crazy. You got to be at least able to phone a friend that can come and put in a good
Right.
strategy for you and know, okay, let's stand you back up and let's get going. So you got to at least have someone that you can count on to call to come in to,
Right.
rebuild
Yeah,
that
you need
strategy
something
or implement
that you
something.
can tap into,
Yeah.
even if it's a consultant or something that you bring in just short term. But I do agree because I think that companies, sorry, I feel like I've got like an itch. People, companies will let go recruiting or staffing or personnel, whatever it is they want to call it, because they don't need that function because they're in a downturn and they're laying people off. I get that. But at the same time, if you're going to stay in business, there's going to be a time when you're going to need employees, right? You're
Right.
going to need to
Ideally,
rehire. There's going to be
hopefully.
natural people, there's going to be people who leave,
Yeah.
who are, going to retire or to go on maternity leave and not come back or whatever. So there's going to be some natural jobs that are going to need to be filled just because of business needs. But you should also have a person who is still there who can go back, to the people who are in those key roles and say, okay, so we let your team go. How are you doing? When we are ready and you do start to get budget for headcount, where do you think you want to fill? Let's start working on those job descriptions now and figuring it out. And maybe I can kind of quietly be putting people in the pipeline that we can call on who in 6 months, when you're ready, we can just go, right? We don't have to start from ground zero,
Danielle, I have
that
a
we can actually,
question.
okay,
I feel like it's a legitimate question because it just crossed my mind.
okay.
So think about that, right? You have this TA leader and now the entire team has been let go. And I think about some of the structures that we've been a part of and how many people don't go back down to that seat. How many, just percentage wise, how many do you think can go back down and actually function in the seat that they are over? I think it's a real problem that they can't, but I'm just
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah,
in your
yeah.
thought, in your
Somebody,
mind, like how many people do you think can't? Because I know I've had conversations with leaders. They're like, well, I'm a director. I don't do that. I'm like, you don't know how
yeah,
your
but what
team
if
is
you have,
recruiting people. This sounds crazy to me. Like, what do you
yeah,
think
what
that
if there
is?
was a natural disaster and there was only a few people who could do, not that you have to do the job, but could you function?
Right.
I remember I used this analogy, a couple of years ago. I was on a call where we were talking about hiring and stuff. And, I used this analogy going back to my retail days where I was a retail manager for a big company and they had locations all over the United States. And you had a very specific way you had to have the store set up. There was things you had to do every day before you opened the store. There was things you had to do to close the store. There was like weekly things. So there was, all these measures in place. And at first, when I first started learning it, I'm like, why are we doing this? This is so crazy. And then, became aware, or maybe somebody talked to me about it. I can't remember, but they were like, basically, if the entire store management team were to die or we're traveling and we're in a car accident,
Yeah.
let's just say, and people couldn't come into the office, couldn't come in to open the store. You might need to phone a friend who worked at another store within driving distance and say, can you come and take over the store? Hand them the keys to the store and they should be able to walk in and open the store and conduct business as if there had been no change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh, now that I get." And I think it's sort of the same idea. Like you have people who should be able to do the job temporarily. This
Yeah.
isn't maybe, you might have to fill the job again or whatever. But like there should be more built-in rails, safeguards that, if something were to happen, because, there's always the possibility somebody has a family emergency and they have to take family leave or
Oh, I
there's
was interviewing for a role. I have a story, professional interviewee here. So I was interviewing for a role.
you need a shirt that says professional
Yeah.
interviewing.
And the recruiter told me, this is another large company, by the way, very large company. And the recruiter said, I'm going on vacation. Okay. So she went on vacation for a week. No problem, right? Someone else going to pick up the work. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Then when she comes back from vacation, she's sick, like sick, really sick for the next week. So now you're 2 weeks out of the process because no one can come in and pick that up for that person and for that recruiter. So you're just piling on. And when they come back from supposedly getting well, right? Now they're going to get really sick because they have all this work that they're walking into that no one
Right.
can handle.
It's
So
going
to
to
your
take them
point, you always have to have a contingency plan.
get caught up and deal with because because when you do come back, you don't have time to just catch up.
Yeah.
Now you've got to do the job still, so it's probably going to take you a month before you're really caught up. Hopefully, that you're going to be there. But I think that's all of it because I was just thinking about times where I've been in a role where I did very specific things that only I knew how to do because there was nobody else to do it. There was nobody else who could do the job and or who knew or who had any interest in it or that worked, in a similar role that was hired to support me. And so it was really hard for me to take time off from work because, the company still had to function. They still needed the resource that I provided. And so, in a certain way, it's sort of like, oh, maybe that's a sense of job security, although it's not. There is no such thing. But you feel like there is because you're like, "Oh, I can't even take a day off because I'm so popular. I really need me," but that's not true. But at the same time, people want to hold on to those things and not open it up so people know what they're doing because they do feel like it's a sense of job security. Like, well, if I let everybody know what I'm doing, then how am I gonna they're gonna let me go because
Yeah.
somebody else can do it. But that's not right. It's
That's
like,
kind of like hiding the sourcing plan from the client, right? Like, oh, don't show 'em.
right,
Oh, anybody can find these sources. It's all how you execute them, right? It's all how you
right.
go about doing it. So, when I think about that, and I was thinking about when you were talking kind of that contingency plan or keeping all that work yourself, there is nothing that I loved more as a leader is when someone told me they couldn't find somebody for a job. Because that was a challenge to me that I was going to be able to dust off those sourcing skills and go to work.
Right,
And I would always tell
right.
people there was one was my favorite story because, we're really good friends now, but she was like, can't find anyone. And jammed out on LinkedIn for a little bit. And I said, call these three. One of those three ended up getting hired by the client. So,
Of
like you
course.
should be able to jump down and understand, in my opinion. And again, this is someone I'm a little biased because of how, I believe in sitting in the seat and really understanding what the recruiters are doing every single day. Regardless
Mhm.
what environment you're in, TA, staffing, MSP, RPO, you better know back and front
Right.
what those recruiters are doing every single day to be able to have the right
Because
conversations
to
with the
hold them
client,
accountable
right?
if you don't end the job,
Yeah.
you know? And how can you advocate for a person in their role if you don't understand how the job is being done?
Yeah.
Because if they get more work for some reason, you can go to your leader and say, well, this person's already overloaded. They've been taking on all this extra work. This is what they're doing. I can help them out a little bit, but that means I'm not going to be able to do these other things. So we really either need to take something off their plate or we need to get more help. So what does that look like? And I think
Mhm.
that you're doing your teams a disservice if you can't not that you necessarily need to be able to drop into the seat and do it successfully for weeks or months on end, but like you should be able to do it like even just for a couple of days just to help out. So if your person needs time off, don't worry, we got it. We can struggle through and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think people are it's sort of like this these blinders go on and they're all people are so focused on their own work, which of course they should be, but if you're a leader, you need to look at the bigger picture
Mhm.
and what's affecting your team. And that if you do hear that there's layoffs coming, that you can be going forward to your leader to say, hey, I understand this is going to happen, but I just want you to be aware of what this team is supporting and how we're doing it. And I want, like, I want to be part of the conversation so that it may not work. I can speak from, personal experience, but still, like, they should have a good idea of what it is that you're doing and how you're supporting it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. So that's why I feel like, when we're talking about talent acquisition specifically, however you want to slice it, right? Talent acquisition, is that overarching strategy that you are using to fulfill roles. It is your market research, it is your sourcing plan, it's your resources that you're utilizing, your different job boards, your search strings, your networks, redeployment of talent within your ATS. Everybody get better at that. People
So
are really bad at that right now.
I
Like,
always feel like
you
we're
got to figure that
rebuying
out
a
because you're
candidate
wasting a lot of money.
profile every year, because every time we bought another Indeed license or whatever, and somebody's working the same, I'm like, we probably have this candidate profile.
Hmm.
Like there's only so many people in an area, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a true specialty in strategy because I feel like if you're focused on the HR employee relations side, which has compensation a lot of times, which sometimes is carved out and sometimes it's put together. And then you have a lot of times, sometimes your employee events, right, are included in HR and things of that nature. Your strategy, your
Yeah.
talent retention strategy is held at HR. When you think about all of the things that HR holds and it comes to talent acquisition and bringing people in, it is truly a specialty in any which way you slice it, whether it's contingent labor and you're bringing that in, you still have to create the staffing plan to say, my workforce
Mhm.
and my mix looks like this. And this is how we're running the business. And this is the desk that the recruiters are working, what it looks like. I'll never forget when I had this client, and this was at Clover, and she was new. She came in, it was RPO. We were servicing both the RPO and the MSP. It was an integrated solution. And she came and she asked me, she's like, Jennifer, why do you have these recruiters set up like this? Because I had in that model, I called it the CPOC model. I always tell people I like Tupac, so I called it CPOC. So they were the central
I can't
point of
believe I didn't
contact.
know that.
I
Like,
thought it was like so creative. I was like, no one really knows, so I named it this. I told people, just I love Tupac, so CPOC just made sense to me. Central point of
right.
contact. And they were doing the MSP and RPO space at the same time. So full-time and contingent labor. And they were the central point that, the other recruiters behind the scenes would feed into because it was very high volume when you did it. And I
Mhm.
grouped these two, what seemed like different facilities together under one CPOC. But it made complete sense because they were so similar of roles. So now you had your MSP team and your RPO team that are looking for similar roles across these two locations, even though they seem to be different. But the engineers were very similar to the other engineers that they would bring in, and if not
Mhm.
the same skill set. And in the one location, we had to try to get people to relocate because the talent was depleted. They had gone through all of the talent in the market. So I said, this is why I did it. This is why it's set up that way. And if you want to change it, change it. But I'm going to tell you, it works well this way. And here's why. And she said to me, she goes, if I change it and it doesn't work and I have to change it back, I will tell you and I will eat crow. And I was like, all right, like, go ahead. Maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later, she looked at me and she goes, I'm eating crow. We're putting it back the way it was. And I was like, absolutely. So having someone that understands, like how to be able to navigate and weigh up all that together, it's a specialty. Recruiting and what recruiters do every single day, spending time with candidates, creating that great experience, using that automation and technology to be able to, swivel chair some of the pieces that to make their lives
Right.
easier to follow up with candidates. It's a
Right.
specialty. It's not something that you should just bucket in with everything else to go get the right talent at the right time, at the right price within, your talent market.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think some companies that are trying to sort of reinvent the wheel on it are gonna end up very disappointed and probably a lot of money lost because they're trying to do. I mean, there's ways to refine it. There's adjustments. There's nuances. There's all that, but ultimately, it's still the same process because if like, I remember we used to talk about this of saying like, what if you lost all your job board access today and you had to come in and fill these roles? What would you do? And it's sort of getting back to that basics in a lot of ways, but not with lack of technology, but by incorporating technology. That okay, what if you didn't have to source resumes and the resumes came to you? How would you approach it? What would you do differently? And sort of all of that, putting that practice in. Because I think, I think we were talking about this before in our last episode, which was just like getting the recruiters on board, you know, and how does that impact them and all of that. So obviously we're very passionate about this.
Talent acquisition, that's my jam.
I know. Like
Making the recruiter's
all
desk
day.
more efficient, that's my jam. Those are the things that
Yeah.
I love to do because I was that shortcut recruiter. Like I
Yeah.
was absolutely. If I didn't have to go through this big long process, I was figuring out what my shortcuts were to get that talent hired faster.
Right. Right. And that's good. Right. I mean, I think sometimes companies are like, well, you're not following the process. Well, like, did I end up with the same goal?
Well,
Did I
as
end up
long
with
as you're hitting those, let me just say, because I am a numbers and a process person to an
right?
analytic. As long as you're hitting
Yeah.
the buckets you need to hit to capture
Right.
that
Right.
analytics. So I can see that pipeline
Right.
and I can see that flow. And you
Yeah.
can
I
see
didn't
it, right? Like
get
when you think
that.
about the programmatic at the front and everything
Right.
else, like as long as you're hitting the right, just hit these buckets. I don't care about anything else.
Right.
Just hit these buckets.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. So I think we agree, right? Talent acquisition, we're saying, is the overall arching strategy alongside of it. Recruiting is you're filling the job, you're getting it done fast,
That
right?
that function of
It's the
yeah.
function. It's the function of talent acquisition. And then staffing is, yes, your contingent labor typically sits there. They still need a strategy. They are still recruiters. Like they're still like, you know what? And what's interesting is there are some people that can jump from corporate talent acquisition to staffing recruiting, and some that can go from staffing recruiting to corporate talent acquisition. And then, even RPO. I'm gonna call RPO its own separate things because I've
Yeah.
also seen RPO recruiters or talent acquisition that comes in RPO and they don't do well at a corporate
They can't do it.
because of the pace, the accountability, what you need to
Right.
do across because you're measured. You're highly, highly measured in an RPO in a
Oh,
staffing company.
every day
Yes.
you're measured. Every day. Not at the end of the month, not the end of the week. Every day.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, I see a sneeze in data. Do we have enough candidates to make
Right.
sure these jobs are filled? So yeah, I mean, they're
I find
tomato,
new applications.
tomato, right?
Why have you not them forward? Why have you not gone through those?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're troubleshooting and you have to, like, to our point of saying, like, the leaders that are sitting in the seat need to be able to come down and really understand and help troubleshoot and say, where do we need to be able to find more talent, be able to talk about the market as well. So I love my
Hmm.
tools like Lightcast and things like that help you really understand the talent market and what's happening, who's moving out, who's
Hmm.
moving in, what does that look like? So you really have to have
Right.
someone who's keeping an eye on that and looking at from a strategy perspective, in my opinion. And when you buckle it in to everything else, there's a lot that gets lost.
And just running the reports isn't enough. You have to be able to interpret it.
Yeah.
Understand what does it mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. All right. Want to stop
Well,
there?
we acquisition problems yet?
What did you say?
Did we solve all the talent acquisition problems yet?
I hope so. Or some of them. I don't know. Or maybe we just created more.
Maybe.
Some people
Well,
are
I
like,
think it's
oh,
all good. It's all good to discuss,
yeah,
right?
I would agree.
What is it all?
Yeah. And it's a topic we're like obviously super passionate about being in for 20 years. So each or so. All right. With that, we have, how many links do we have and how many channels are we on now? So we are on YouTube, we are on Spotify, we do our shorts on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. I think you just set up last night, iHeart. And what am I missing, Danielle?
Pocket Cast, Amazon Music. It's supposed to be on Audible too because of Amazon, but it hasn't shown up yet, and I'm not sure why. So I got to look into that. But there's Apple is a little bit more difficult, but once we get on Apple, hopefully get that done today, then that will naturally spread it out to some other places. But we're definitely going to be in all of your
Wherever you like to listen.
wherever you want to listen, wherever you want to watch, it's going to be there.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's end this episode by saying like, share, follow, um, keep us going on this
Comment.
podcast. We're enjoying it.
Yeah. And comment because it helps our algorithm, helps us get more views. And, so we're not just like, doing this for our friends and family, which we appreciate them too.
Yeah,
I don't,
they gotta listen. Force it.
but a lot of my family is like, what is she even talking about? We never heard her talk about this before.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. Yeah. So we're on all the platforms. Make sure you check us out. Give us comments. We're doing everything ourselves, from everything
Yeah.
you see that is loaded out there. That is all us doing it. So
It's all figured out on our own.
yeah. Any feedback you give us too, we appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Nice.
Till next time.
Up next week.